One of my favorite passages in the book of the Bible comes from the book of Acts in chapter 15. And the whole chapter is really fascinating because it's essentially a group of believers coming together, trying to understand what their new normal looks like. Because prior to this, it was essentially a bunch of Jewish followers following after God. They knew what to do, what not to do, what their faith looked like. Happy days, or so it looked. But now after Jesus has entered into the human story, now there were these people following after Jesus, and Jewish people that had now converted to follow after Jesus, and non-believing people who had now converted to follow Jesus. And there's this mismatch of cultures, and how would they all come together and how would they move forward in their new normal? Because now they have to be together, they have to worship together, but how can they do this? Because the Jewish people, previously Jewish people, have things that are deeply important to them. Non-Jewish people have no idea about those things. And all of this comes together in Acts 15, and they have a discussion around how they do community, how they do church moving forward. And I love down in verse 19, in chapter 15, verse 19, it says, "And so it is my judgment that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God." Another way of saying it is my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for those who are turning to God. Because the big discussion on the floor was, for the Jewish people, one of the huge parts of their identity was circumcision. They believed that this was a key sign that they were committed to God, that they were God's core people. To be circumcised was to say that you were part of God's following. And when you became a Jew, that's something that needed to occur, right? Like that was part of the core business. But if you didn't grow up with this, or you didn't hear about this, and you've all of a sudden heard the message of Jesus and want to be a follower, but you realize that now, as a grown man, you have to be circumcised, that would be a bit of an obstacle that would get in the way, right? So this committee comes together in Acts 15 to figure out what's important and what's not. And for the Jewish people, circumcision was a huge thing. But this whole discussion ultimately comes to this point in verse 19 when they're talking about circumcision. They're talking about this big thing that was core to them. And they say, "So it is my judgment that we should not make it difficult for those who are turning to God." And they say that this big thing that was core to who they were, they don't want to make it the big thing anymore. They don't want it to be an obstacle for people turning to God. So they remove it. Something that was core to who they were because they saw a bigger picture. They wanted to make God more accessible because God himself is accessible. So why stand in the way of people turning to God? And that I really enjoy because I didn't grow up as a Christian. So I didn't come in, with all of these understandings of how Christianity works. And it's pretty easy to feel on the outer. But Acts 15 talks about creating a safe place where people can come and experience God. So what obstacles are in what we do in church, and how can we maybe think differently about them? How can we pull the ones down that need to be pulled down, or how can we re-articulate what is core and important to us, but in a way that is still accessible to somebody being able to come to God? Because according to the books of Acts 15 verse 19, it is my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for those who are turning to God. God is open, God is accepting, God's arms are there ready to receive us. I hope that brings you comfort, because it does me. God is open and accepting and loves us and wants all to come in. We just have to make sure that we don't stand in the way. So this verse invites me to look at what I do and how I'm doing life. And am I making things more difficult than they need to be? Of course, there are things that are core and important to who we are, but those things are not there to be obstacles to keep people from God. They're an invitation to come to God. So how can we look at what we do? Have a think about that. See how it plays out in your life and how you do community. And until we talk again, stay safe, hold hope, and we'll talk soon.